The council chamber had seen its share of strange delegates, insectoid queens glittering with jeweled carapaces, gaseous beings contained in shimmering force bubbles, crystalline lifeforms who hummed entire treaties instead of signing them. But nothing in its thousands of years of history had prepared the galaxy for the moment the doors hissed open and in walked the humans, led not by an admiral, not by a priest, not by a diplomat, but by a lawyer. "Good morning, esteemed colleagues," said a cheerful man in a perfectly pressed suit, his tie patterned with tiny scales of justice that glowed faintly in the chamber's light. He adjusted his glasses, set down a stack of documents thick enough to break orbit, and gave the kind of smile that, on Earth, preceded either a settlement or a funeral. His badge read, Marcus Vance, J.D. The counselors stared. Counselor Sharat of the Kalari, long-time architect of galactic treaties, flicked his tendrils in confusion. "Forgive me, human delegate. Were we not told Earth would send a mediator to arbitrate this conflict?" Marcus clasped his hands politely. "We did. I'm a mediator. I just happen to practice law. Mediation, litigation, negotiation, it's all paperwork and polite threats if you do it right." The Oscary delegate, a spider the size of a small shuttle with too many eyes to count, clicked his mandibles in distaste. "You brought a lawyer to a war council?" Marcus sipped from a steaming cup of coffee he had somehow smuggled into the chamber. "Well, technically you brought us. You asked Earth for a mediator. We looked at the situation. Multiple species accusing each other of violating treaties, fleets mobilizing, colonies caught in the crossfire, and we thought, sounds like a contract dispute. So yes, you got lawyers." "Plural?" asked Sharat, dread dawning. Marcus smiled wider. Behind him, the chamber doors opened again and 24 more humans in sharp suits entered, each lugging briefcases like they were precision weapons. One carried a stack of binders taller than himself. Another was already highlighting clauses in glowing text across her tablet. The aliens blinked in collective horror. "And, Marcus added, almost as an afterthought, we also brought Marines." The chamber trembled as armored footsteps echoed. A squad of heavily armed human Marines marched in, their movements perfectly synchronized, weapons at rest but very visible. They took up quiet guard positions at the walls, visors glowing faintly. "And an evacuation plan," Marcus finished brightly. "Because, safety first." The silence in the chamber could have collapsed a star. At first, the galaxy thought it was a joke. Surely humans had misunderstood. Surely they didn't think contract law, heavily armed soldiers, and emergency evacuation protocols constituted mediation. But then the lawyers got to work. They spread like caffeine-fueled termites, burrowing into treaties that had lain undisturbed for centuries. They unearthed clauses no one remembered, contradictions no one dared admit, loopholes big enough to fly a battlecruiser through. Where alien mediators spoke in flowery riddles, humans dealt in scalpel-sharp language. According to Article 17, Section C, one lawyer intoned, "Your fleet isn't merely in violation of treaty law, it's actually responsible for providing compensation to the very colonies you're blockading." The offending delegate sputtered. "That's not what the clause meant." Marcus raised a polite eyebrow. "Intent doesn't matter. Language does. Next objection." Within hours, entire galactic powers found themselves legally responsible for wars they hadn't started, colonies they hadn't occupied, and reparations they couldn't possibly pay. The aliens whispered among themselves. Earth hadn't sent mediators. Earth had sent predators in business suits. The tension rose further when the Marines quietly demonstrated what evacuation plan meant. A Kalari aide wandered too close to the humans' command console and accidentally triggered a holofeed. It displayed evacuation schematics for the entire council station, every deck mapped, every corridor assigned, every species given a priority route. But what chilled them was the second layer beneath the evacuation map: combat overlays. Kill zones, fallback positions, fields of fire. The humans hadn't just planned to evacuate the council. They'd planned to defend it, retake it, or, if necessary, scuttle it. When asked to explain, Marcus just smiled. Mediators have to plan for all outcomes, especially the worst. Fear crept in. The Oscary delegate whispered to the Thessari crystalline envoy, "Do they always bring soldiers to negotiations?" The envoy hummed nervously. "Worse. I think they bring contingency plans." The galaxy had underestimated humanity again. Soldiers were dangerous, yes. But lawyers? Lawyers came armed with words that could cut empires apart, backed by soldiers who could make sure the paperwork stuck. The climax came during the third day of mediation. The Varn, a reptilian species with little patience for word games, slammed their claws against the table. "Enough!" roared their warlord, eyes blazing. "We will not be bound by petty legal trickery. We will take what we want by force." A hush fell. Marines shifted their stance. Marcus remained seated, calm as still water. He took a slow sip of coffee, set the mug down with deliberate care, and said, "Warlord, I'd advise against that course of action." The Vaughn sneered. "And why should we fear your words, little lawyer?" Marcus tapped a button on his tablet. The chamber lights dimmed. A hollow display flickered to life above the table. It wasn't words. It was footage. Human fleets, vast and silent, hovering just outside the system. Carriers like mountain ranges in orbit, destroyers aligned in precise formations, troop transports waiting in the shadows. No weapons fired. No threats spoken. Just patient, silent readiness. The council chamber erupted in chaos. "You brought a fleet?" Sharat shrieked. "You call this mediation?" Marcus folded his hands politely. "Of course. Negotiations go smoother when everyone understands the consequences of bad faith. Consider it a visual aid." "OT." The Vaughn warlord's scales paled. His claws trembled. He sank back into his seat without another word. Fear turned to awe. The galaxy realized, with dawning horror, that humans didn't separate law from war. They blurred the lines until a treaty clause was as sharp as a blade, and a marine's rifle was just punctuation. They negotiated with contracts in one hand and evacuation drills in the other, smiling all the while. Even their cultural quirks became ominous. Coffee breaks were no longer harmless. They were seen as strange war rituals, moments where humans replenished their ability to grind civilizations into legal paste. Their habit of carrying backup pens became a metaphor for always being prepared to rewrite reality. Their endless jokes about worst-case scenarios were no longer funny, they were prophecies. By the end of the week, the war was over. Not because treaties were signed, though they were, but because no species dared risk what would happen if they broke them. When the final document was sealed, Marcus stood, stretched, and gave the council his warmest smile yet. "Well then. Mediation complete. We'll pack up our binders and go." Relief swept the chamber. The humans were leaving. The galaxy could breathe again. Then Marcus paused at the door, turned back, and added casually, "Oh, by the way, if anyone's thinking of breaking these agreements, don't worry. We've already filed the contingency paperwork." The delegates blinked. Marcus's smile widened. "The evacuation drills you saw? That was Plan B. Plan A is still classified." He tapped his tablet. For a single, horrifying second, the chamber filled with schematics of something vast. Not a ship. Not a weapon. Something bigger. Something planetary. Then the screen went black. Marcus picked up his coffee. Just the demo, he said lightly, and walked out. The galaxy wanted a mediator. Earth sent lawyers, Marines, and an evacuation plan. And hidden behind their smiles, humanity left the stars with one final truth. This wasn't negotiation. This was the warning.